These times are strange, it's quite surreal. It's never been like this. Remembering the good old days when we could hug and kiss. Back to gyms and restaurants and move through public settings. We'd give high fives and drink at dives, hold hands and dance at weddings. Now the days are longer, yet the darker in a way. We're pressing pause on normalcy, just going day by day. But we can still make jokes and art, garden, dance and sing. Cook, read books, try on fun looks and learn about new things. We can talk with friends of ours and have a heart to heart, just so long as we all stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you, 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical, so step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.
Thank you for coming to Slightly Scary Stories. My name is Taryn Edwards, and I am one of the librarians here at the Mechanics Institute. How many of you have been here before? Many of you? Wonderful. If you haven't been here before, after the event, I want you to walk down the spiral staircase, which is right over there if you exit the room. Mechanics Institute was founded in 1854. It is the oldest library designed to serve the general public, not just people who are mechanics. We're also a cultural event center and the oldest chess club in the United States, which, if you were to walk right through that door, don't walk through this one now, but if you go outside and around, you can go straight into the chess room and check that out during the intermission. Many of you have already discovered where our restrooms are, but the men's room is in the chess club and the ladies' room is just opposite the elevators. There is a trick to getting in. It is a push door, not a pull door. You will never get in if you pull on it. So if you have any problems, check in with me during the intermission. So I'm delighted to host you tonight, and I just wanted to shout out and thank my colleagues in the back, because without them, I wouldn't be able to host this event. So, and I want to thank our stalwart storytelling friends and the writers here at the Mechanics Institute, because I know several of you have turned out to support us tonight. So thank you. And one of those stalwart storyteller / writer friends of the Mechanics Institute is one of our speakers tonight, Kate Farrell, and tonight is her 81st birthday. Thank you, Kate. I love you, and I'm so happy that you and I are friends. And we will be having a special celebration, cake basically, during the intermission. So don't eat too many crackers and strawberries. All right, so moving on, our MC, our Master of Ceremonies tonight is a member of our community, Mr. Corey Rosen, who is a master storyteller and writer and the host of The Moth. He has spoken for us twice here at the Mechanics Institute, and his book, Your Story Well Told, is in our collection. So I encourage you to check that out. If you're at all interested in telling your story, it's the place you want to start. So thank you, Corey. Welcome, and welcome back, and thank you for being our host tonight.
Edwards, everybody. Yes. Can you hear me okay? How's my volume? Good. All right. Terrific. How about at the home audience? Can I get someone to put a thumbs up emoji on the Zoom. I can't see it. It doesn't really matter. Hello, welcome to 6 Feet Apart Productions, Night of Slightly Spooky Stories. Yes. Now, is there anybody, before we get too deep into it, anybody here who gets seriously spooked out by spooky stories? I see some young people. Oh, I see some not as young people. Okay. Yeah. All right. So the young people are fine, right? Good. I was told these were slightly spooky. So if we veer into slightly spookier, just close your ears. Right? Okay. How would you actually even do that? Can you show me closing your ears? I'm getting nothing. But there you go. They're closing them from the inside. That's one way you can do it. So everybody show me closing your ears from the inside. There we go. Kind of felt like I was doing a Kegel there. Anyway, because, I do those. Hi, guys. My name is Corey, by the way. What is your name? Go ahead. What is your name? There you go. We're a community here. So, I might ask you things and then you can talk back to me. It's okay. You're not being recorded. There's no microphone in front of you, is there? No. You guys, this is a special night. Do you know what's special? What's different about this night? What's different about this 6 Feet Apart Productions production? What is different about this from all other? It's going to be spooky. Yep, that's one thing that's different. What else is different? It's live! I can see the other storytellers, and they're not in a little box. They're not in a window. Does anybody here ever actually attended a 6 Feet Apart Productions online production? Yeah, most of you. Fantastic. It's an incredible group effort creation that Claire and Regina and who was the original other founder? And Mary and Mark conceived this thing, 2+ years ago. This thing called the pandemic began, right? Anybody remember that? Yeah, remember the pandemic? Yeah. And rather than letting us hold us back and stop the sharing of stories and the community impact that we have when we gather and tell stories, literally lost no time and created a forum where people could gather and share stories. And it is this amazing thing that they've built, because it wasn't just local storytellers. It's this community of national and international people. And what you're going to have tonight is a little bit of a sampling of that. These are people who are gifted storytellers from all over the place, and you get to hear them, you in the room get to hear them live. So give it up for that, for all the storytellers. And you watching at home, you get to see it the way it was originally intended to be seen, which is on Zoom. So there, we have the best of everything, right? You're not missing out in either event. So you are welcome here. I would like to ask one favor, because some of these stories will be slightly spooky. And what would spook everybody out would be if your phone went off. So let's go ahead and just make sure that they are silent. Just silence your phone, whether that is just no ring or silent, or my favorite thing is focus modes on the Apple phones. You know about those? You can create a special focus thing and just say I don't want to get my Instagram notifications. And I can just have that turned off for an hour, right? Isn't that nice? Or I only want my phone to ring when my mom calls. I don't know. There's just different things. So if my mom calls any of you, answer it, because it's my mom and I would get in trouble. All right, so that's about that. Let me tell you kind of what we have in store for the show, and then we're going to get to telling some stories. Cool? Great. All right. So yes. Who's excited about the show? Yes, I am. I'm so excited. So what you're going to have tonight are 8 storytellers. Each of the stories is, they're going to be a range of different kinds of stories: true stories, folk stories, mythological, all different kinds of stories. They are going to have in common some level of spookiness, whatever that means. And each of them is going to be I've been told, about 8 to 10 minutes in length, just so you know in your internal clock of how long is this lady going to keep telling us? Okay. Sometimes that happens, right? You're at a dinner party and somebody's telling a story and you don't know if it's a quickie or if it's going to be I have to hold it. That kind of. So they're all going to be about that length. We're going to take an interval at the half, as you heard. We're going to celebrate the wonderful Kate Farrell's 81st birthday. with some cake and refreshments and things like that. Just some housekeeping. If anybody needs to leave for any reason, don't go out this door. I would just say go out that door and go to the restroom, or don't, or wait until the break, because that would be like you're coming on stage if you came out this door. That's that. And any other business that I left out? No, I'm getting thumbs ups from the back of the room. Everybody feeling good? You ready to hear some stories? Terrific. All right. Well, I have the great privilege to introduce your first storyteller tonight, who is, I would say, an old and dear friend of mine. We've known each other for, I'd say, more than 20 years. We performed together. We've told lots of stories together. And something that I did not know about our first storyteller is that one of the things that first hooked him into storytelling was about 35 years ago. He heard a spooky story that just grabbed him and really like captivated his imagination. And is part of the reason why he loves storytelling so much was a story that he heard at that time. So we have the great pleasure to hear one of his stories tonight. So please welcome to the stage, Tim Ereneta.
Totally true. Hi, everyone. I have an old story from Scotland. And it's the story of the Great Red Cat. And it starts once upon a time, back in Scotland. There was a fellow by the name of Murdo McTaggart. A fisherman he was. He'd go out fishing every night in his boat. Stay out all night, bringing fish in the morning. All night, every night, no matter what. But one year, it was All Hallows' Eve, the night you should be in church or at home praying for the souls of the dead. But where was Murdo? Down in the fisherman's hut, getting his boat ready. Now a storm had come up. Lightning was flashing. Thunder was rolling. The rain lashing against the sides of the hut. So Murdo thought he'd wait it out. There in the hut, mending his nets, when all of a sudden, the hair on the back of his neck stood up, and he felt the eyes of someone or something watching him. He turned to the door of the hut, and there, filling the doorway, was a great red cat with golden eyes, the color of a fox. He'd never seen a cat that large, and the cat sauntered in and sat down, staring at him, followed by a second cat, a black cat with red eyes, who sauntered in and sat down, followed by a third black cat, and a fourth, and a fifth, and cat after enormous black cat came in, until at last, as Murdo was holding his net, he was surrounded by 12 great black cats and one great red one, all staring at him. And then all at once, they all grinned and showed off their sharp white teeth. There was a flash of lightning, the crack of thunder, and then the great red cat spoke up. "Friends, on such a fine stormy night, why should we sit here in silence when we should be honoring the dead? Let us lift our voices in song, sing a coronach for Murdo McTaggart here." And the cats all began to wail, singing a good, loud, and long coronach, a funeral song there in the hut. It was so loud, it was so piercing, it nearly split the walls of the hut. And when they were done, they all sat there staring at Murdo. And then the great red cat said, "Now come on, man. Wasn't that a fine coronach for you? Go ahead and pay the singers a little something." Now Murdo, he didn't suffer fools, and he was a sensible man. He said, "Why should I pay for a coronach? I didn't ask for one. And me, I'm not even dead. I'll not pay." And the great red cat said, "I hear singing whets the appetite. And the 12 great black cats grinned and showed off their sharp, white teeth. Murdo saw in their eyes they were hungry, and then he looked over their heads out the door of the hut, and there on the hill, standing with its back to the rain, was an old bony sheep. And he said, "Up there on the hill, that's your pay." And quick as a flash, the cats dashed out of the hut, up the hill. They fell upon the sheep. And in a moment's work, there was nothing left but a pile of white bones licked clean. And then the cats were back in the hut, surrounding Murdo McTaggart. And the great red cat spoke again. "Come, my friends, why are we sitting here in silence?" Another coronach for Murdo McTaggart, and the cats began to yowl even louder than before. And this time Murdo thought his own ears would split with the din and the caterwauling. And when they were done, the great red cat said, "Wasn't that a fine coronach, Murdo? You'd better pay the singers." But Murdo was a sensible man. "I didn't ask for a coronach, and me not even dead, I'll not pay." "But the singers are hungry, my friend." And the 12 great black cats grinned and showed their sharp, white teeth. And at that moment, Murdo looked over their heads. Out the door, there on the hill, was an old bony cow leaning into the rain. And he said, "There, that's your pay." And the cats were out the door in a flash, up the hill, on the back of the cow. And then there was no cow at all. Only a pile of white bones, picked clean. And in a flash, they were back in the hut surrounding Murdo, and the red cat said, "Why should we sit here in silence? Let us raise our voices in a coronach on a night to honor the dead." And the cats began to wail again, and this time, Murdo knew he was in a desperate situation. He looked up on the hill. There was only 2 piles of bones, nothing else to offer the cats. And that's when he realized the cats had come there to pick his own bones clean. When the song was done, the great red cat said, "Come now, Murdo, pay for the coronach." And at that moment, running by the door of the hut was a deerhound, the laird of the county's own deerhound, swifter than swift, and ran up the hill to sniff at the bones. And Murdo said, "There's your pay, after him." And the cat dashed out of the hut. Oh, but the deerhound, he thought it was a game, and he began to run around the hill and then out across the moors, and all the cats followed. And Murdo wasted no time. As soon as they were out of sight, he was out of the hut, racing down the road to the village, to safety. Oh, but my friends, that deerhound, swifter than swift, soon left the cats behind. And the cats, angry, and the cats, hungry, turned around and came back to the hut, and then began off after Murdo McTaggart. He heard the yowls behind him. He heard the screaming and the caterwauling, and he realized he would not make it to safety that night. He wasn't going to make it to the village. He spied a tree, and he began to climb as high as he could, higher and higher, until he was in the very top branches. And he looked down below, and the black cats ran by, but the red one stopped right at the bottom of the tree, looked up, and then cried out, "Hold, my friends, we need search no longer. For isn't that Murdo McTaggart up this very tree?" And one of the great black cats began to climb up the tree, higher and higher, and as it reached the top, it reached out its great claws to grab Murdo. But Murdo always carried a dirk in his belt, and he took it out, and he stabbed that creature through the heart, and its body dropped to the ground. A second cat met the same fate, and a third, the same, and at last the great red cat said, "Hold, my friends, we'll not get him down that way. If we can't go up, then we must bring the tree and Murdo down with it." And suddenly these great cats began to paw and claw at the earth around the roots of the tree. And at last they uncovered one great root, and then, grinning with their sharp, white teeth, they began to gnaw through that great root. There were 13 of those enormous cats, and soon the root was cut through, and the tree began to lean, and Murdo cried out, "Help!" And his voice carried across the moors. It carried to the village. It carried into the church, where the priest was saying service for All Hallows Mass Eve. And the priest paused and said, "I heard the cry of a man in need." But the deacon said, "No, it's a trick of the wind. Keep going with the service, Father." And the priest continued the service. And now the cats were uncovering a second great root. And when it was exposed with their sharp white teeth, they began to gnaw through it until at last they cut through. And the tree now lurched the other way. And Murdo called out again, "Help!" And this time the priest said that was definitely the cry of a man in need. "We must go to him." And the priest gathered his things, and along with his deacon and some of the men from the service, they ran out in the direction of the cry. And as they arrived, the cats had uncovered the third and last great root of the tree with their sharp white teeth. They made quick work of it, gnawing right through, and at last the tree began to fall to the ground. With a great crash, it hit. Murdo leapt up with his dagger, and the cats leapt up too, and at that moment the priest arrived, and he had come prepared with a flask of holy water, and sprinkling it on one cat after another. One by one the cats dropped to the ground until at last there was only the red cat left, and the priest emptied the entire vial onto the cat, and it leapt up into the air with a cry, with a yowl that pierced everyone's ears and disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving behind only the stench of sulfur and brimstone. Murdo and the priest and the men looked around the tree, and there were 12 great black cat skins. No sign of muscle or bone, for it had not been 12 cats there threatening Murdo, but 12 demons from hell. And the great red one? Why, that was old Clootie himself, the devil. Ever since that day when All Hallows Mass Eve came around again, was Murdo out fishing? No. You would find him in the front row of the church, saying prayers for the dead, like all good Scotsmen should. Thank you.
One more time, let's hear it for Tim Ereneta. Yes. Beautifully told. Thank you. Such a great story, and a reminder to all of us. I think now we know what we're going to be doing on Monday night. Yes. Yeah. We're going to go to Scotland. We're going to do. Yeah. Fabulous. Well, we have a lovely, wonderful treat of a story coming next, following Tim's story. Our next storyteller, as you have already heard, is celebrating an important day today. It is her birthday, so happy birthday to our storyteller. To honor that and to celebrate her birthday, you were all, of course, encouraged to purchase her book, which is on the table there. It is called Story Power. It is wonderful. It is one of my favorite books on storytelling. And you can purchase one if you want here. She will probably sign it for you if you want. Yeah, yeah. And if you are watching online, you can buy it anywhere else online. Okay. Lastly, I've a little something about Kate's story that she's going to be telling, which is something that she actually talks about in her book. Do you not? About braided stories? Yes. Is that can I say a little bit about that in my intro? So something that is unique, you will notice in Kate's story that she's going to tell, is the way that she tells this story and the kind of the style of story it is, which is known as a braided story, which is that it combines a true story from her life with a Greek myth. So you will see sort of the threading of multiple kinds of storytelling together in one. So notice, observe, learn, maybe buy a book and do it yourself. All right. With that, I welcome to the stage my good friend, Kate Farrell.
Good job. Is that too low?
Is that too low?
Yeah.
Thank you, Corey. That was great. Love the sales pitch. So, my story is called Southern Ghosts. When I was about 7 years old, back in 1948, my family, always on the move, decided to try their next chance for success in the poorest state in the country, Mississippi, and found housing in a former servants' quarters. Now, they're set way back from the grand resort mansions that face the Gulf of Mexico, were ramshackle houses and outbuildings that were abandoned during the Depression and World War II. It was cheap housing, cheap rent for the white folks who lived in that segregated town where Jim Crow was strictly enforced. Now, we kids in that neighborhood played in random groups up in the piney woods and down the back road. And one of our favorite spots was an ancient cemetery up a shady rise with overgrown with live oak trees and Spanish moss hanging down over the gravestones that were stained black and green with age. Bet you won't lie down on that grave, said one boy. It's the oldest grave in the graveyard. Yeah, that one has a ghost, said another boy. It's a lady, and she floats up out of the grave when the moon is full. What you gonna bet me to lie down on that grave? My comic book says you won't lie full down on that grave with your head at the stone. What comic book? I asked, because if it was going to be a Katie Keene, I was going to take the bet. I bet my Archie comic. Well, I walked away from the boys and sat down by the moldy old headstones while they took turns seeing who could lie longest on that grave. It was easy to hear the ghosts whispering in the trees, cackling. Sometimes I wish I could join them, floating in their freedom, invisible, hidden. I called on them to show themselves. Evoking Melanoe, daughter of Queen Persephone of the underworld. That night, she came into my dream. Who are you? I whispered. I am Melanoe, goddess of ghosts, daughter of the queen of the underworld, goddess of the dead. I wander at night with a train of ghosts. She was frightening to see. As she floated closer and turned around, I saw that her left side was black and hardened, and her right side was white and chalky. She wore an open golden cloak with a deep hood. Her eyes were dark, but all-seeing. It's good you came, Melanoe, I said to her in my dream. There are ghosts everywhere in this southern town. Can't you take them away? What? Do you realize how many desolate, lingering ghosts there are around here? She raised her arms, one black and one white, as if trying to call them to her, and wailed like the fierce wind of a hurricane. It's up to the living to release southern ghosts. And she whipped her cloak around her and faded away to haunt the dark. Now, one day, us kids in that hardscrabble neighborhood, we decided to sneak in to Middlegate Gardens again, that forbidden estate. We slithered through the towering bamboo grove that grew on one border of the gardens, and making sure everything was clear, we came into a place beyond our dreams. It was a huge Japanese tea garden with stone lanterns and statues of strange creatures. There was a tea house, a pagoda, a guest house, and ponds of slow-moving carp. And watching above it all was an enormous bronze Buddha up stone stairs, protected by 2 snarling temple guards. To us, it was our amazing playground. Now the boys spread out in a silent game of hide and seek, but I, being the only girl, crept closer to the big house. And there I found an empty swimming pool. I noticed, it was in a curvy shape like a lagoon. And then I noticed there were windows up in the second story of that house, dark and quiet. But I climbed down the rungs of the ladder in the shallow part. And the pool, that empty pool, had such a large cement floor that sloped down to the deep end that I began to dance and spin and twirl. But all the time, I was glancing up at those dark windows, thinking someone was watching me, a wicked child. But even if the house was empty, I knew there were ghosts in there. The fine ladies who threw fancy tea parties for the New Orleans rich and wore silken dresses and flowered hats. I heard them sigh of their glory days, hissing at me to leave. Melanoy and all those in the underworld were masters of the dream and could enter them at ease. That night, Melanoy came into my dream again. "Did you think I forgot you?" she cried into the moonlit room. Come on my flight. Don't worry, you'll return this time." I allowed myself to float up and out my bedroom window in her tailwind of ghosts over the beach and the Gulf. And Melanoy called out in a warning voice, "Notice the waters are restless. The seas everywhere are rising up, awake and aware." Her black side seemed to disappear in the night sky, but her white side gleamed in the moonlight and vanished. Leaving only a living nightmare, as she often did. Today, these many years later, the tea garden and all the grand houses are gone. destroyed by hurricanes Camille and Katrina. Even the Buddha toppled from his high throne, decapitated, broken, swept away. Now, only ghosts whisper in the bamboo leaves, the dry leaves of the bamboo grove run wild.
Keep it going for Kate Farrell. All right. So before we go on with the next storyteller, can I do the thing? I was handed a note, which is some special appreciations for our online people. So forgive me to give some attention to you. And the first one has something that is one of two words. I'm going to just go with one. I want to thank Judy Clapper for motivating the YouTube chat. Is that the right word? Or was it moderating? It was motivating. Oh, motivating. Did she give some motivational advice? Is that the idea? It was like, oh, moderating. Okay, so either moderating. I thought that, like that's something we can all do a better job of on YouTube is to motivate each other. So think about that next time you're on YouTube. Motivate someone. So thank you, Judy, for your motivation and moderation. Also on the YouTube, thanks to some devoted watchers and followers, including Eileen Walsh, Alan DeBay, Jessica Robinson, Deborah Taylor French, Elena Beth Kay, and Elise Marie Collins. Thank you. Yes. Hope you can hear that. Don't worry about that. I'll get that later. All right. Let's go to our next storyteller. Are you guys feeling a little scared? Good. Well, it's about to get super scary in here. You're going to see the dye job that Mark did. I'm just kidding. That's not the scary. All right, so your next storyteller really needs no introduction to this crowd, but one thing that I would like to say about Claire Hennessy is that she's a wonderful friend, really not just a gifted storyteller, but an incredible community organizer. Like is half of a third of the power that has brought this community together, and we have a lot to thank her for that. Let's thank her for that. Yes. And even though she just asked me yesterday to host the show, she forgot to ask. But I actually hosted the first ever 6 Feet Apart Productions show, online show, and now I'm hosting this. So I feel like there's some symmetry there, which is always nice in a story. But some upcoming things, if this is fun to you and you're enjoying listening to stories, Claire has some upcoming shows that you can also check out. One of them is next Thursday at the Castro Theater. The Castro Theater. Claire will be performing in the Moth Grand Slam. Yes, telling a story at the Moth Grand Slam. The theme there is Never Again. It's going to be a great show. And later in November, there's a really fun show that she's doing called, what's it called again? The Good Liars Club. The Good Liars Club. So Tall Tales. So look it up. There's information online. Maybe we could put it in the chat for people online to check it out. It's on the website. So, all right. So that's some upcoming places that you can see her. But without further ado, please welcome to the stage the one and only Claire Hennessy.
Thank you, Corey, and thank you, everybody, for being here and everybody online. It's very exciting. So back in 2005, I was a single mum of 2 young kids, and I just started to get my toe back into the dating pool because I'd split up for my husband about a year or so previously. This was back in the days before Facebook and Instagram and thank God Tinder, but it was still pretty horrendous. I'd been out on a couple of disastrous dates, one of which the guy was so incredibly boring and also really short, so we spent the whole evening just talking to my cleavage. So I was bemoaning this fact to my best friend, and she said, why don't you write your soulmate list, as it's a much better way of manifesting? Now, my friend and I are both really spiritual. We believe in a higher power, angels, angelic beings, universal energy, whatever you want to call it. We used to follow loads of spiritual teachers. We read loads of spiritual books. We went on retreats. We did angel cards, tarot cards, you name it. We were out there. So I was totally convinced that's a good idea. So the next night, just managed to get the kids to bed. It was cold and dark, and it was pouring down with rain. The wind was howling. And I thought, I'll write my soulmate list. So I wrote it out. Tall, handsome, all his own teeth, kind, maybe good with kids, perhaps no need of Viagra just yet. Those sorts of things. Folded up the list, put it into this lovely little wicker basket, and was about to put it on the shelf next to my bed when suddenly a name was whispered in my left ear. I thought, those bloody kids, have they got up? Turned round, nobody in the room with me. Totally nobody. It was really spooky. All the hairs on the back, on my arms and the backs of my neck stood up like I'd been electrocuted. It was like so weird. Anyway, I thought maybe I'd imagined it, except that the name was really clear. And the name was a man's name, and it was Mark. And I thought, that's weird. Why would someone call me Mark? So, weirdly, I did know a lot of Marks. My brother was called Mark. Two of my best friends were called Mark. My boss at the time was called Mark. There were so many Marks at work that we'd had to nickname. There was New Mark, Old Mark, Biker Mark, and one Mark that for some unknown reason we called Ferret. So, but for some reason, some sick spidey sense made me think that this name that was in my ear had nothing to do with somebody I already knew. Anyway, it was a little bit freaky. Put the box away. A couple of nights later, it's at night again, got the kids to bed, and I'm on my bed doing my angel cards, and there I am. And I pull out the soulmate card. And as I do that, there's this massive burst of energy. And it's like not in me. It was somehow, weirdly, outside me. That's what it felt like. And it was like I was blown back against the headboard. I can imagine in my head a little cartoon with my hair blowing back, you know. It sort of felt like a steam train coming towards me full speed. And it was really weird. And I thought, oh my God, have I unleashed a poltergeist into my house? All these freaky hippie things I keep doing. So I put the soulmate card into my little wicker basket with my soulmate list, tried to get to sleep, but it was a little bit scary, I have to say. And then a couple of weeks went past, and I just come back from the pub after a rare child-free night out, and I'd had 1 or 2 glasses of wine too many, or probably maybe more than 1 or 2. And so I thought it was a totally reasonable thing to get onto my computer and open up a school reunion website, because this was back before Facebook and everything, and look for an old boyfriend, like you do when you're drunk. And I found him, and his name was Bug, wrote him a little email, and my finger was sitting there, shall I send this? And I had a little bit of a moment of sanity, like, do I really want to send an email to an old boyfriend I haven't seen for 30 years? And then it's like my finger acted on its own accord. I didn't push it down. To this day, I may have been drunk, but I still think it was like something pushed it down. And then click, and the email was gone. Oh my God, what have I done? I was like, oh no, have I really become one of those awful cliches? Somebody who just emails all her own boyfriends because she's a little bit tired and a little bit lonely and bored and, let's face it, a little bit drunk. So I rushed off the bed, cringing, wishing to God I could just take back that email. In the morning, get up, a little bit nervous about opening up my computer, but I'm delighted to find an email back from Bug straight away. He hadn't forgotten me. In fact, he said he's, always remembered me. Oh, I was flattered and delighted, and I have to say, just a tad relieved. So we start up this email correspondence every day. I get to find he's moved from England and he's now living in California, just north of San Francisco. He's doing rather well for himself. He's got his own house, his own company. He's even got a swimming pool. Coming from England, that's the height of luxury, let me tell you. So we're emailing backwards and forwards, and then about 2 or 3 days after we start emailing, he sends me the lyrics to a song that was really popular back in the day. And they're quite suggestive. I'd never known that. Another couple more days goes past. He sends me the song Je t'aime. Oh, okay. Then a week goes past. Huge bouquet of red roses arrive on my doorstep with a note that says, beware of stalkers. Quite as I was expecting. A little bit nervous now, thinking, what the hell have I done? I'm just assuming he's this guy I know. He could be some mad axeman, couldn't he? I don't know. So I think maybe he might have just flown across the pond and at this very moment could be peering in my curtains. So I go round to check all the locks. Anyway, about 3 weeks after we've started emailing, he suddenly declares his undying love for me, says he's always thought about me over the years and he's always been in love with me. I'm thinking, well, really? He doesn't know me. Mother of 2 kids, pelvic floor that's completely destroyed. Rest of my body, haven't actually taken very good care of. And I've got financial debt about the size of a third world country. I think maybe if I'm awakened a sleeping dragon, you know. Do I really want to rekindle a relationship that after 3 decades? So I thought, be responsible, Claire, go and check him out a bit. So I looked up his business website. Now, he was a software engineer. It was the most boring website I've ever come across. Pages and pages of indecipherable software packages for sale. So I trawled through some of that, found the About Us page. Honestly, dead in my tracks. I got goosebumps all over my body, tingles everywhere. Looking around, this is really weird, because there, on his About Us page, was his proper name. I just knew him as Bug, but it was Peter Mark Hennessy. I never knew his real name. I only ever called him Bug. Rushed upstairs, got my little wicker basket, opened it up. Well, maybe Bug's the mark that was whispered in my ear. So I immediately emailed him and said, is that really your correct name? He comes back and says, yes. Nobody ever really calls him, in America anyway, didn't call him Bug anymore. That was a UK nickname. And he never went by his first name of Peter, because everybody, including apparently poltergeists, called him Mark. Thanks.
Keep it going for Claire Hennessy. All right. We have coming up our last storyteller of the half. How's everybody doing? You doing good? All right. Doing terrific. So I just learned something new about the next storyteller, which I never knew because I received her card. And of course, the thing that she asked me to talk about is an awesome thing that you should all check out and be aware of. The first, that she's part of an organization called Asian American Storytellers in Unity, which is an amazing affinity group for storytellers, Asian American storytellers. And they have a YouTube page called Asian American Storytopia, right? Which I am totally checking out, and you should too. But on the other side of the card, it has that Linda's skills and jobs include storyteller, naturalist, which is not a naturist. That's an important distinction. She may be, but that's not listed. Naturalist, events producer, which I know well from your amazing work with the Northern California Storytelling Festival. Are you involved in that still? Yes. And sushi instructor. Yes. So I'm not saying there's going to be a story about sushi instruction tonight, but I want to hear that story sometime. Can we maybe get a rain check on that? Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. But definitely do check out Asian American Storytopia. And welcome to the stage, Linda Yemoto.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, talk about a different version from Claire's story. This is about another kind of couple. Mukashi mukashi, aru tokoro ni, which means long, long ago in Japan, there was a young woman of marrying age. And because her father was the most important person in their village, like the mayor, her marriage was very carefully arranged. And at first, she was excited to be married. She liked her husband, having just met him, because he was hardworking, he was nice looking, and he was very good to her parents. She wanted to please him. But it seemed that nothing she did could please him. He didn't like the food she cooked or how she prepared it. He didn't like how she kept the house or tended the garden. He criticized her hair, the way she spoke, what she wore. Nothing ever pleased him. And as for her, she found him so annoying. She couldn't stand the way he dragged his zori, his slippers, as he walked. Ska, 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 ska. How he slurped his tea. How he ate his food. It got to the point where she could barely stand to look at him. She was so unhappy. But she couldn't tell her parents. She couldn't complain to them because they had worked so hard to arrange this marriage. They would probably disown her if she said she wanted out of the marriage. They would tell her shigatakanai, which means there's nothing to be done. But she did not want to live that way. And so she decided her only choice was to go find Basama, the old woman of the mountain. Basama lived over a mountain, over a mountain, over a mountain. It was a long, hard journey. And when she finally found Basama's hut, she stood in the open doorway with her head bowed very quietly. Basama was at her loom weaving. Shoo, ch, ch, shoo, ch, ch, shoo, ch, ch. Finally, the young woman had enough courage to, "Sumimasen, excuse me." Shh, ch, ch, shh, ch, ch. "Hontou ni chiritai desu ka?" Do you really want to know? Yes, I do. Very well. Walk to the west. Walk until you find the mulberry tree covered in silkworm caterpillars, and wait. They will form their cocoons. And on the night of a beautiful full moon, collect as many of the cocoons as you can and return home. And then, on the night of a beautiful full moon, boil the cocoons and reel off the silk. And wait. On the night of a beautiful full moon, spin the silk into thread. And then, on the night of a beautiful full moon, weave the thread into cloth. And then, on the night of a beautiful full moon, bleach the cloth in the moonlight. And then, on the night of a beautiful full moon, sew the cloth into a kimono for your husband. But tell no one of this kimono. And then, on the night of a beautiful full moon, present the kimono to your husband and help him dress. Domo, domo arigato. Thank you very much. And with that, she walked to the west until she found the mulberry tree covered in silkworm caterpillars, and she waited until they spun their cocoons. And then, on the night of a beautiful full moon, she collected as many of the cocoons as she could, and she returned home back over the mountain, over the mountain, over the mountain. And then she counted the days and waited until the night of a beautiful full moon. She boiled the cocoons and she reeled off the silk. And then, counting the days again, on the night of a beautiful full moon, she spun the silk into thread. And then, on the night of a beautiful full moon, she wove the thread into cloth. And then, on the night of a beautiful full moon, she bleached the cloth in the moonlight. And then, on the night of a beautiful full moon, she sewed the cloth into a kimono for her husband. And then, on the night of a beautiful full moon, she presented the kimono to her husband. He was thrilled. She had never done anything like that for him before. It was so finely woven, so beautifully sewn. He didn't even mind that it was white like a burial gown. He didn't even seem to notice that as she helped him dress, she did not wrap it right first and then left like a living person wears their kimono. She wrapped it left first and then right, as you would dress a dead body. And then, as she put the wide obi belt around him and tied it, his eyes glazed over. He glided to the front door, slid it open, and went out into the moonlight. Oh, she was so excited. She was relieved. She felt free. But then, after a few days, she began to wonder, what happened to my husband? Exactly. Where did he go? Is he coming back? And this gnawed her so much, she decided she had no choice but to go back to find Basama. Over the mountain, over the mountain, over the mountain. And again she stood in the open doorway. Basama was at her loom. Shoo, ch, ch, shoo, ch, ch. Hontoni shiritai desu ka? Do you really want to know? Yes, I do. Very well. Return home. And on the night of a beautiful full moon, walk to the 6-way crossroad outside your village. Shh. 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 Domo arigato. Thank you very much. And so she returned home, back over the mountain, over the mountain, over the mountain. And then counting the days, on the night of a beautiful full moon, she walked to the 6-way crossroad outside their village. The sun was setting. The full moon was rising over the mountains. She looked down the various crossroads and she thought she could see a figure in a white kimono gliding toward her. Is that my husband? And as the figure got closer, she could hear he was reciting a poem. By unwittingly wearing clothes bleached in the moonlight, I am now a servant of the god of night. By unwittingly wearing clothes bleached in the moonlight, I am now a servant of the god of night. That is my husband, but he can no longer see me. He just walked right past me. Husband. Sumimasen. I'm sorry. And that is all.
One more time for Linda Yemoto. All right, and that takes us to our intermission. We are going to take a 10-minute break, so feel free to get some refreshments. There is some cake set out for you there. For those of you at home, do not worry, because we have a different kind of intermission for you. There is a 10-minute video custom compiled by tech guru Mark himself. So enjoy a look back at, oh, you also cut it, Claire? Yo, Claire did it. That's all right. Mark's just going to press play. So anyway, no, Mark did it. All right, forget it. There's a marital squabble. Enjoy the video. Enjoy the cake. We'll be back in 10 minutes.
Is this thing on? Hello? Is this 6 Feet Apart Productions? Hello?
Megan, come back! Get back! Stay 6 feet apart!
6 Feet Apart production enables you to listen to lovely stories from throughout the globe without seriously infecting your audience.
Because you know what? All storytelling is only 6 feet apart.
Check in to 6 Feet Apart and see all their wonderful, wonderful things that they do, because they're quite utterly brilliant.
We'll see you online, there, or live. Oh, Simon! Come back!
What's like the short version? Is it SFPA?
SFAP. So 6 feet apart. Yeah.
So the SFAP, like if you're a real SFAPy.
All of you SFAP people, all of you fans out there, because you are what really keep SFAP going. And obviously it's not Claire who's doing it. We all know that. But Regina and Mark are very helpful, and they put on a good show.
Okay, Claire, I love you.
But otherwise,
so you want to so you're so you've got your instructions are squeeze the melons.
That's what I was taught growing up. You should always squeeze the melons. No?
You roll, which for you Americans is toilet roll. Over or under?
Oh, over. Always over.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. That is the right answer. There is a right
answer.
Although
I've got a funny family who they seem to be against putting it onto the roll itself. Like I've got a family, they're like put it on the counter kind of people. I'm the only person in my household that actually like takes a new roll and sticks it on the bloody thing. So I'm the only one who chooses. So it's always over at my house, because otherwise it's just sideways.
Over. Yes.
Over.
Oh, okay. This shows that I've been married for a long time. If you had asked me this question, let's say 28 years ago, I wouldn't care. Didn't know there was a difference. But one time I was in a public restroom after I'd been married for, 4 or 5 years. And they were out of toilet paper. And so there was a roll, sitting behind me. on the toilet. And so I unwrapped it and I thought to myself, I'm going to hang this up so the toilet paper comes off the bottom instead of off the top. And no one will ever know, because in our house, we're all conditioned it comes off the top. And so I hung it so it came off the bottom or the back. And I left the bathroom knowing my wife would never know. And then I honestly went back and replaced it just in case something weird happened if you went in there.
Over, because I don't like my hand knocking against the wall.
Over. Easy.
I am a whatever is easiest.
My answer to that qualifies in the fact that I have a bathroom that I maintain at my business and like 50 people use. And I would just say any paper, please don't throw it on the floor.
I find under is better because you can really snatch it.
None. Listen, I've looked this up. I went back to the original patent for toilet paper because I can't believe that anybody even thinks that it's up for discussion. Of course it's over the top. Of course it's over the top. And if you go back to the original patent, you will see there a very carefully sketched picture of, a drawing, an illustration of the toilet roll with the paper over the top. The only
Light your candle, and this is a very special SFAP birthday song, custom written just for you. That a birthday induction for 6 Feet Apart Productions, born from a pandemic when most of us couldn't function. Claire and Regina got on Zoom as their arena to share each other's stories as the host they called up Corey. And now it's 1 year later, Suez Canal's blocked by a freighter, and we are all still Zooming. 6 Feet Apart Productions are booming. We'll all soon get vaccines so that we can hail a taxi to be all together, no matter what the weather. But until then, we celebrate this forum that you did create, so thanks for all the stories. Happy birthday from your old pal, Corey. Happy birthday, 6 Feet Apart Productions.
Thank you so much. Corey, you can blow my candle out.
I don't have a mirror, and I've never cut my hair before in my life.
I'm going to drink a toast right now to Ereneta. All right, so here we go. That's for her, okay?
He'd reverse in and then he would just bump each car forward and back until he got the space big enough that he could actually fit the bloody car. And we'd look at him in horror. He goes, well, that's what bumpers are for.
Oh, she's not unmuted yet.
Oh, you ain't unmuted yet, Miss Diane.
Not unmuted yet, Miss Diane.
Hotter Than Billy Be Damned, which I never quite understood because I didn't know who Billy was or why he was damned or why that was a good measure of the temperature.
That's an ominous sound, huh?
And was the sound of the swoop of his mighty leg, and then pop as he kicked the cat straight up into the tree.
What I thought would be a really fun thing to do for Pride. So just out there and fabulous.
That's not a good question for me.
Keep it long on top.
Oh, go JP.
Oh, go JP.
To the county fairs throughout the Midwest. About, oh my God.
That's not a good question either.
I kept hearing a cat, but to this day, I never saw that cat. I don't know where Mittens is.
What's that? Oh, apparently I've already drank a toast to my mom. So let me drink to my grandmother. Okay, to my grandmother. Cheers.
What's the point of having one feather boa when you can have two, darling? Two feather boas. So obviously, doubly fabulous.
Wait, hang on just 1 second. Give me a bit. All right, it's really good for cutting up a chocolate bar. I can relate to that story.
No, that's really a dumb question.
What? Okay, apparently I've already toasted to moms and grandmothers. So, stepmoms, everybody, let's raise one for stepmoms.
So I can't see the back, so I think I've given myself a mullet.
You get a bunch of Depression era women together and you put them in a place where there's free breadsticks, it's going to be off the hook.
Everybody get ready to jump.
It's got a little-headed man from Georgia going round the bend.
This is possibly the weirdest thing I've ever done on film.
My cauldron's making a lot of noise here, so I'm just going to move it out of the way. We like to get together, and I had just joined a coven before the lockdown, and it was the Get Some Lovin' Coven, and it's kind of like a Match.com for witches. That was great. I love it. It was just very sort of like calm, but that almost made it spookier.
Yes, very mystical.
Yeah, exactly. Very mystical. Cheers. And that's witches. We're not really thrilled with the state of Massachusetts. I think you know why. If you've learned your history, we just had some bad things happen there. So we've moved to the West Coast. I bet. Yeah, we could all use a magic hand every once in a while. Am I right? I mean, especially if you're a parent. I'm a witch mom. You got to have like 3 hands to keep track of those kids. But just hang on. I got a little dinner. I hate when I overcook it, right?
Ribald is the word troubadours would have used to describe their slightly more naughty and adult content stories and songs.
Ribald it's a type of grain, and then you scratch all the hairs off of it, and then it becomes ribald.
Something that is like risque, a little bit sexy, also a little bit like dirty. Like we're talking like kind of like Sex in an Alley, but the alley is like next to a botanical garden. And so that would be like kind of ribald, like and cheeky, a bit cheeky for the Brits out there.
This is not part of the show, right?
No.
Okay, good.
Here are my 2 feet, and here they go apart. And here is my 6 feet, and see you on 6 feet apart.
Quiet, the world grew dark. We closed our doors, the outlook was stark. Then came 2 angels and a tech named Mark, who gave the world 6 feet apart. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart Productions, a story stage for the COVID age, and opened up our hearts, even from 6 feet apart. Now we've all been vaxxed now. We've seen each other and our long hair's been axed now. But that's no reason to slow the art of storytelling with 6 feet apart. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart, 2 years. So we'll raise a glass to kicking ass, to Regina, Claire, and Mark, for giving us 6 feet apart.
Thanks, guys.
game. This is called Foga. Foga, fake yoga. So you can stay seated if you want, or you could stand if you want. But we're gonna do some fake. I am not a yoga practitioner. I don't even do it, but I am a fake yoga practitioner. So stand up, and I'm gonna lead you in some fake yoga poses. Okay, ready? Let's see. This is the the champagne cork pop pose. Okay, so lower your arms. Take a deep breath. And on the exhale, raise your hands and go. And namaste. Very good. Very good. Yes. That is that. What's one more yoga pose you would like to learn? Give me the name of this yoga pose. Something like that's a real yoga pose, so I couldn't teach you that. The storyteller. This is the storyteller. Okay, so everybody stand. And you're going to take a deep breath. And you're going to, with your right hand, wipe your nervous brow. And then you'll do it the left hand as well. And then shake. And namaste. Namaste. All right, have a seat. There you go. That is the storyteller pose. Are we ready yet? No, I'm getting the no. Yes, we're ready. Okay, welcome back to slightly scary stories. I think I said slightly spooky stories before. Do you prefer one or the other? Scary, spooky? What's better, a spooky story or a scary story? Spooky. So we'll call it slightly spooky stories. It'll be one of each. All right. Well, lovely to have you back. Before we continue with the show itself, what is coming up in the 6 Feet Apart Productions universe, Regina? What is your next event? Yeah. 2 open mics are coming up. November 9th, Hoodwinked. December 14th, Tis the Season. Are you looking for storytellers? Looking for storytellers. Is this going to be in person or online? Online. Okay. So if somebody has a good Hoodwinked or Tis the Season story, how should they get in touch? sfapshows.com. Click on the advert and submit your story. And we would love to have that. That is how we keep growing this show. Also, just a couple of appreciations. I want to thank our friends at Mechanics Institute. Thank you for hosting us tonight. And that includes you all, the volunteers, helpers, staff, and this incredible building. I had the good fortune of having my first in-person storytelling show since the pandemic also here back in May, and it's wonderful. It's an incredible building. For those of you watching online that have never been here, it's really cool. For those of you who haven't yet seen maybe the coolest room in all of San Francisco, check out the chess room, right? If anybody, yes, so applause, yes. The coolest. Is anybody here a chess master? Yes, I am not either. So good. I think we're in good company. So I challenge anybody here to a game, because if you were, I would say, great, I will watch you play a game. But I tend to get beat in chess by my son more often than not. Okay, let's move on with our show. Shall we? We shall. Okay. Our next storyteller is part of Tell It on Tuesday, one of the board members, organizers of the Marsha's Wonderful Tell It on Tuesday. If you are not familiar, definitely check it out. Some great stuff there. And I recently learned that he got, what did you get? What was the award? Parents' Choice? The Parents' Choice Award for his CD. He has a CD which is called But Why? But Why? And it's a storytelling CD. Yes, yes. So if you are interested in an award-winning storytelling compilation, please check out But Why by our next storyteller, the one and only Kirk Waller. Give it up.
All right. Thank you, Corey. Little John Bon Temps lived with his mama and papa down by the marsh. And he was getting to be a big boy, almost a man to hear him tell it, almost 12 years old. And little John, he didn't like his mama always telling him what to do and what to be careful of, but he knew how mamas are. So she was always warning him. Little John, now you know where not to go, what not to do, who not to be with, where not to sit. And the way little John felt about it, she just wanted him sitting on a log and doing nothing the rest of his days. But one thing that she told him every day, and it was every day, she said, little John, now you know, and he did know. He could say it right along with her, but he didn't dare. He didn't want to get hollered at or whooped or nothing, so he just sat there and nodded like it was the first time she said it. She said, little John, now you know, don't you go nowhere near that marsh. And then she'd pause for effect. You hear me, boy? Yes, ma'am. And then she said, you could get hurt or fall in the water or drowned or killed or something. Pause. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. Now, he didn't mind her fussing at him because he knows that's what mamas do, but he wondered why his mama, all of her warnings and stories had to do with gouging an eye out or somebody getting dismembered or losing a leg or ultimately dying. But this particular day, his papa was paying attention to little John, how he kind of rustled in his seat and looked nervous and kind of huffed and rolled his eyes when his mama wasn't looking. He knew it was time to finally tell him. So mama went out the house. He pulled up a chair and he sat real close to little John. He looked around the house and made sure she wasn't listening. Little John got real stiff like. Yes, sir? But he didn't say nothing. He just got a little closer. It was almost like knee to knee. Looked around to make sure his mama or no one else was listening. You know why your mama don't want you to go near the marsh? No, sir. Not really. You know she had a little sister, Jean. Yeah, kind of, but she don't say much. I don't know nothing about her. Well, they used to live right here. They grew up in this same house. Not too much younger than you. There was like 2 peas in a pod. Jean was a little sister and your mama was a big sister. And sometimes your mama was the mama on the counter. Mama and papa was always out working so much, but when you saw one, you saw the other. Yes, sir. One day, little Jean, she went to go gather some killing wood, took the shortcut down there by the marsh. She disappeared. Disappeared. They couldn't find her. All the kinfolk and neighbors and everybody went looking for her and hollering out her name. Couldn't find her nowhere. It wasn't until nighttime somebody found her little straw hat floating in the marsh. Papa, I'm sorry. I'm real sorry, but I ain't gonna fall in the marsh. You think I'm gonna fall in the marsh? That ain't it, son. You see, it's a little spirit. What? A ghost? Like a ghost? Not like a ghost. You see, sometimes she comes across a marsh and she calls out. Sometimes she sings out. I know moonrise. I know starrise. He looked around like maybe he shouldn't be telling him this story. Maybe he shouldn't be singing a song. Lay this body down. All right, Papa. All right, I won't go near the marsh. But his papa's eyes were somewhere far away. He didn't pay no attention, little John. He didn't even pay attention to the blood running cold from his face, or his arms and neck getting all goose flesh. He said, see, a little spirit comes across the marsh at night sometime. She looked for her family and she calls out. She wants them to come with her. She gets lonesome. And she only calls for family. So your friends, they safe. They safe to go along the marsh. But you family, she'll come after you. Stay away from the marsh. Now Little John was listening. He didn't go anywhere near that marsh. And it was wintertime, days was short and got dark early. He had no reason to go anywhere near there. But when the long days of summer came, Little Johnny, he forgot about his mama's warnings or his papa's stories. And every once in a while, he and his friends, they would go through that shortcut by the marsh, but only in the daytime. But one summer day, he was down there with Jimmy, and they got caught in town just when the sun was starting to go down. They wasn't doing nothing particular, just fooling around and being kids. And Jimmy hollers out, Little John, it's going to be dark. My papa's going to get me good if I miss supper. Let's go. So they jumped up, and Jimmy started running straight for the shortcut right alongside of the marsh. Little John stopped, just looked at Jimmy's back as he disappeared around a bend. I don't know if those stories are true or not, he thought to himself, but Papa had him spooked. And then he kind of stood up inside himself. He said, I ain't scared of no marsh. If my papa's stories are true, if that's a big if, Jimmy's with me. So I ain't got nothing to worry about. So he ran up ahead and caught up with Jimmy, and they just walked as fast as they could, looking up at the moon. Little John noticed how it was bright and clear, kind of silvery. He looked down at the marsh water, and the moon was glittering and glowing. And they just walked along, listening to the wind whistle and whoosh through the grass marshes. And then just as quick as his throat got tight, his chest got a little heavy. And he called out to Jimmy, or he thought he called out to Jimmy, but nothing came out. And Jimmy walked on ahead, and Little John was just standing there. And Jimmy sure enough didn't hear him, and he sure enough didn't see the little girl coming across the marsh, real easy and gentle-like. She had her arms stretched out. I know moonrise, I know starrise, to lay this body down. And Little John felt all peaceful inside, like his mama was holding him, giving him a great big old hug, and he closed his eyes. It was almost as he could see himself. And he could see himself when he was big. He was a man. He was tall and strong and handsome. And his mom was just standing there beaming at him, smiling all proud. And she was holding out her hands. When Little John opened his eyes, little Jean was smiling and calling him. Walk in the moonlight, walk in the starlight, to lay this body down. The water was gathering around his feet. He didn't pay no attention to it. For he knew it was around his knees and his waist. Walk in the judgment in the evening of the day, to lay this body down. I'm coming. It was up around his chest. Then next thing you knew it, the stank of the marsh water was in his nose and his mouth, and he was gagging, and the world went dark around him. Next thing you know, he was sitting up in bed. His papa was there, and little Jimmy was there too. His papa was telling him how Jimmy pulled him out of the marsh water, and he was hollering for him, Mr. Bontemps. And his papa came and pushed the water out of him and breathed new air into him. And his papa said, "We got your back. We got your back, Little John." He just looked at his papa for a long time. He couldn't say nothing, and finally the words come. I saw Mama's sister. She sang to me. Then Mama came in, and she had something hot to drink in a blanket. She put it around him, and tears were in her eyes, just welling up. And she didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't have to say nothing. She just cried and looked at him and tapped his hand. I ain't never going near that marsh again, Mama. And I'll never want to hear that song again. I don't never want to hear that song. And he didn't go anywhere near that marsh. Even when he grew up, even when he became a man and had kids of his own, lived right there in that same house. And he would tell him, his own 2 little kids, he'd look at him and say, now look here. I don't care what nobody tell you. I don't care what they say. Don't you go near that marsh. Then he'd pause. You hear me? In the evening of the day, when I lay this body down. Thank you.
Kirk Waller, everybody. So good. So good. Fabulous. Oh, here he comes. Our next storyteller is something of a wallflower. Sort of a don't look at me kind of person. He's a gem. He's someone that I have gotten to know through years of doing storytelling, through The Moth and other places, other shows. And there's just something that happens when he walks into a room. You're like, it's going to be an interesting night. So you're all in for it. He can next be seen after tonight, also at the Moth Grand Slam, which will be November 3rd in San Francisco at the Castro Theater. Yes, tickets are on sale at themoth.org. Please welcome to the stage, JP Frary.
Is that good? My older son is getting married this weekend, and I apologize if I'm a little frazzled. I was supposed to work on this story all day, and the printer said, we're delivering all the stuff on Monday. The wedding is Saturday. So I printed stuff for him all day. Anyways, the greatest day of my life was when my aunt and uncle got divorced. And I apologize if that sounds cruel. I know it wasn't the greatest day of their lives, but I didn't have a brother growing up. I had 2 sisters, an older and a younger, and I love them. One of them's here. However, whenever my parents let us choose something, there was some weird form of democracy, and they were the southern states that voted in lockstep. So if I wanted fish sticks for dinner, they said macaroni and cheese. If I wanted to watch Hogan's Heroes, nope, you're watching the Brady Bunch. Hey, they even like to play Monopoly, but if I said Monopoly, nope, you're playing Mystery Date. So my aunt and uncle get divorced. They have a son, Dennis, who is the closest thing in the world that I have to a brother. He is close in my age, and he reacts poorly to the divorce. He's 14. We all would at 14. And he starts acting out and getting in trouble. And they have separated, and they're trying to figure their stuff out. And in the end, neither one of them can take him. And I beg my parents to let him live with us, to come in and move, to even things out for me. And my prayers are answered. He moves into my house. And the day before he moves in, my mom says, you know, he has a lot of trouble, and he looks up to you, and you have to really help him and teach him the right way to be. And the truth is, I was more of a delinquent than he was. And so when he moved in, there was about a week of this Norman Rockwell stuff where we ride bikes together and we play in the creek and we fly kites. And somebody gave us a plane model, an airplane model. It was a kit, and it came with these little jars of paint. And we were assembling the model, and one of the jars of paint fell off the table and broke on the floor. And within 10 minutes, We had all the bottles of paint, a wrist rocket. It's a really fancy slingshot. And we were riding our bikes around town looking for stucco walls, cinder block walls, and firing jars of paint at the walls. Red, blue, silver. This is Ukiah, California, 2 hours north of here. If you go to the municipal park in town with the big rocket, the public swimming pool, which is cinder block walls, there are still 3 paint marks. It looked like some weird form of artillery had hit because you do it at an angle and the paint splats. That was just the beginning. We ran out of paint. We didn't have money, so we went to the store and stole paint. The little model things, they sell for like $1, and we're just filling our pockets with them and leaving and shooting them. We actually shot them at the Thrifty Drugs where we stole the paint. The week before Halloween, he and I are riding our bikes around at night. At night, we're not even supposed to be out. And in Ukiah, there are 2 tall buildings. 3 stories is a tall building. One is the jail, and across from it is the Old Palace Hotel. This is an old Victorian hotel that was condemned and closed. It's so old that Black Bart had drinks there. Black Bart was this crazy cowboy in California who wrote poems and robbed stages. This is really a true story. You should look it up. But it was condemned. There's an old brick building. The windows are boarded up, but there was a fire escape. And we saw this dumpster, and we rolled it over, climbed on the dumpster, and went up the fire escape. So we had our own playground, 3 stories above State Street. And initially, we just went up there to get high because we were 14 and smoked dope. And back then, you could smoke a joint and not be in a coma because the marijuana wasn't like what marijuana is today. And we're up there, and there's all this stuff. There's like an old furnace pipe and this tube that's like broken off, and you can holler into it, and it makes sound that goes down. And there's also a sprinkler system, and there's a spigot. And we turn it, and water comes out. So the electricity is off, but the water works. Now, Halloween is coming up, and we're too old to trick or treat, but we're not old enough to drive and have dates and whatever. So we get this idea. It came to both of us, and this would only happen if the 2 of us were in the same spot. We're going to bring water balloons. We're going to bring all these balloons and make water balloons. And as people are going around trick-or-treating and wandering around, we're going to chuck water balloons off. Now, the 3rd story of this building is above the streetlights. They're not going to see us. And we can randomly just nail people with water balloons from wherever we want. And we're up there, and for hours we're making balloons. Just stacking them up in the corners like gun turrets. And at first, we don't try to hit people. We just want the balloon to splat. And, you know, there's moms with little kids in ghost outfits and whatever. And the kids are, you know, running loose. But being who we were at the time, eventually we start hitting people. And we're aiming just for teenagers that are in trick-or-treater outfits and should not be. They should definitely not be trick-or-treating. So they have it coming at first. And we're not throwing at cars in the beginning, but then it's like so easy. The cars are easy to hit. And coming down the street is a 1965 Impala that has been chopped and turned into a convertible. And it has shiny rims. And the guy driving it has tattoos you can see from a block away. And we both just arm up. And he's coming towards the only stoplight in town at the time. It's slowing down, and we just let fly. And they're arcing through the air, and you're watching, and we're watching, and we're watching, and a balloon hits him right in the head. And then another one on the seat next to him, and in the back seat, and the windshield, boom, 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 boom. And we arm right back up and throw more at this guy. And I lean over to watch him land, and he looks up and just points right at me. Now, the only way up is the fire escape. I feel pretty safe at first. His car is at the stoplight. He just gets out, leaves his car at the stoplight, and heads straight for the fire escape. And we watch him, and we're like, what the? There's nowhere to go. Like, he's coming up, and he is yelling, I'm going to beat the living shit out of you two. And Dennis turns and sees that furnace pipe that we've been yelling into, and he just dives headfirst into it. And I hear, boom, and a sound. And the guy is at the 3rd floor, and I'm like, well, I'm in. The furnace is gone. It drops into a drop ceiling that it now has a hole in it, a body-shaped hole. And Dennis is in a bathtub. It ends up in a bathroom in the hotel. Remember, this hotel is condemned. All the windows are boarded up. It's dark as shit in there. And he is like, are you okay? And I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, I think I'm okay. So that drop ceiling broke our fall. Now, it's dark. The only thing I have is a lighter from lighting the joints we've been smoking. And I light the light, and we're in a bathroom, and there is a mirror. So the first thing I see is a flame in my face, and I'm like, ah! And jump back. Now we hear the guy on the roof going, where the fuck are you? Where are you kids? Where are you kids? And he finds the furnace pipe, and he leans in and goes, are you in there? And we just, and the son of a bitch climbs in the furnace pipe. He knows right where we are. We run out of that bathroom. It's dark. Trip over an end table that's on its side because this place has been abandoned for years. Find a door. There's a little light coming down a hallway, and all the motel room doors are open. Every single door to every room is open. And this guy is trying to climb down. He didn't dive like an idiot like we did. And he's trying to climb down. And Dennis goes, close all the doors. Close all the doors. So we close every door except one. We go in and we hide under the bed. And this guy climbs into the bathroom, and we can hear him walking down the hallway, opening and closing doors, opening. Now it's dark. He can't see. And he comes in the room that we're in, and his feet next to the bed. And he looks around, back out, down the hallway. We wait, and it's quiet. He must have gone out the bottom. We go, tiptoe, down the stairs to the 2nd floor. It's the creepiest thing you've ever seen. A hotel that is condemned. It smells like mold and rats and weird stuff. And the two of us, we're, 14, walking through. We get onto the 1st floor. There's a ballroom. And the ballroom has a bar. And there are old bottles up there. It's literally like they just said, everybody out, and shut everything down. And we walk over, pull a cork off a bottle. It's wine that's gone bad. Within minutes, we're smashing the bottles, throwing shit around. We made it. He's gone, whatever. And then this voice goes, you two idiots. I knew if I just sat here, you'd come walking out. You're going to clean my car. That guy ended up hiring me to work for his plumbing and electric firm. His name was Bob Foreman. And we are washing his car, and he goes, it's the only tall building in town. That's where the water balloons had to come from. I circled the block 3 times watching you pelt people. He wasn't even mad. In the end, he went, this is really creepy. This whole bar. For the next year, while Dennis lived with us, it was our personal hideout. We'd go up the thing, down through the furnace pipe, and hang out. You couldn't go out the doors because they were boarded shut. That guy hired me because I hit him with a water balloon. Thank you.
One more time, JP Frary. And I know that there are some kids watching tonight, so some employment opportunities for you. Great advice, professional advice for you. My dad's advice to me when I was looking for jobs was to put golf on my resume. And I am a terrible golfer, but he said people play golf. It's it's something that executives play, so they'll see that, they'll hire you. So I did. I put golf on my resume, and then when I got hired for this internship, I asked the woman who hired me, why'd she hire me? And she said, well, you had golf on your resume, and I play golf. So my dad tells that story on every time he plays golf. All right, let's move on to our next storyteller. Storytelling is something that we all do naturally, but storytelling shows don't just happen by themselves, right? They take effort, they take organizing, they take planning. And our next storyteller is one of those people that just does things, like makes storytelling events like this happen. Am I right? Yeah. She is chair of the Storytelling Association of California. Yeah, that's a big deal. Yes, big deal. And they have an incredible event that is usually every spring. I think the next one is going to be in April in Orinda, California. It is called the Bay Area Storytelling Festival. Yes. So not too soon to plan your next trip, Jessica Robinson, to San Francisco area for that. And I'm just delighted to hear her slightly scary story. So please welcome the one and only Sara Armstrong.
Check the height of this on this. Yes, it sounds like it's good. Is it good? Is it good? Yeah, it's good. Okay, great. Thank you. Well, Ovid was a poet, a Latin poet who lived a long time ago. And his most famous work is probably The Metamorphosis, which is a poem that's 11,000 plus words long and includes more than 250 myths. So I'm going to tell you one of those myths. I am Daedalus. You've probably heard of me because I'm famous. I'm a famous guy. I'm an architect, an artist, an inventor. I solve problems. And you may also have heard about the trouble in Athens. I was accused of pushing my nephew off the top of a building because I was jealous of him. He didn't even die. The goddess Athena changed him into a partridge before he hit the ground, and he circled a couple times and flew away. But I was tried for and convicted of attempted murder and invited to leave Athens. Well, my son Icarus and I went to Crete, where King Minos and Queen Pasiphae welcomed us. Now, King Minos had a little problem of his own. Poseidon had given him a beautiful bull to sacrifice to Poseidon. And it was so beautiful that King Minos decided to keep it and used another bull. Poseidon wasn't very happy. So he invited Aphrodite to come help him figure out how to punish King Minos. Now, what they came up with was to make Queen Pasiphae lust after the bull. She came to me and she said, "You must help me. I must have this bull." It was the queen. What could I do? So I made a structure of wood and cowhide, and she was able to satisfy herself. Well, after a while, she gave birth to a monster, a minotaur, who is the head of a bull and the body of a person. And it was one that lusted after human flesh. So King Minos said, "We must contain this creature, and you must help me. You must figure it out." So again, I constructed a labyrinth, a place that was so difficult to find your way in and out of that not many people could do it. In fact, a couple times even I had trouble finding my way out. Well, children, boys and girls from Athens were brought to the Minotaur, as a sacrifice. And Theseus, one of the heroes of Athens, put himself in that group at one point. Now, as soon as Theseus landed on the shore of Crete, Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos and Queen Pasiphae, fell in love. So she came to me and said, "You must help me. There must be a way that Theseus can go in and come out of the labyrinth." Was the king's daughter. What could I do? So I told her, this is what you do. You have him put a sword into his sleeve, because no one was allowed to go into that labyrinth with weapons. And you have him tie a thread at the beginning of the labyrinth and unroll that thread as he finds his way through. And then he'll be able to find his way back out. And that's what he did. He put the sword in his sleeve. He took that ball of thread. He tied it to the beginning of the labyrinth. He walked in, always keeping his head down, never left, never right, always down. And he got to the center of the labyrinth, and there was the Minotaur asleep. Well, he woke up pretty quickly, and there was a horrible, horrible battle. But Theseus prevailed, and the Minotaur was dead. So he took that thread and he followed it back out to the front of the labyrinth, and there was Ariadne waiting for him. And he took her off in his ship. But not very far. He tired of her and left her on an island. Well, King Minos was furious with me for giving Theseus a way to prevail. So he confined me and my son Icarus into a tower that I had built beside the labyrinth, so you could see what was happening in the labyrinth. Excuse me. And so we were there at the top of the tower, and we could look out and see all of the land, and we could see the king's soldiers guarding all the places that you could perhaps escape from by land, and all the king's soldiers who were down at the port, guarding the port so you could not escape by sea. So there we were. We looked around, we were there for quite a while, and we noticed the birds circling freely. How wonderful to be able to fly freely like a bird. And then we noticed that on occasion the birds would drop their feathers. And so we started collecting the feathers. And I should tell you too that in a corner of that tower there was a beehive. So there was the sap from the bees that we could use to put together wings. We came up with the idea of creating wings that perhaps we could use to fly to freedom. We also knew that we needed to build our upper body strength because we had to support ourselves for quite a distance, and so we worked at that as well. And it all took a long time, as you can imagine. All of the feathers had to be graduated and figured out into 4 wings, 2 for Icarus and 2 for me. And all the time we were preparing our strength. And all the time we talked about what we would do. And we had a mantra. Icarus, you must follow me above the water so that the water doesn't get your wings wet and drag you down. Below the sun, so the sun doesn't melt the wax. And you also will lose the feathers. Above the water, below the sun. Above the water, below the sun. And we practiced that for a long time as we built our wings. Well, the day finally came. We helped each other put our wings on. We stood on the edge of that building. We looked at each other once more and smiled, and we leapt. And we were soaring. We were flying. It was the most incredible experience. We were flying. So we were flying towards Sicily, a long way away, and I looked back, and there was Icarus above the waves, below the sun. We were soaring. Icarus above the waves, below the sun. We were flying. I looked back, and Icarus was gone. I looked around, and I noticed the shadow. And I looked up, and there was Icarus, flying above. I tried yelling at him, he couldn't hear me. I tried to go a little higher, he didn't see me. And he probably didn't notice for a while, as I did, the feathers starting to fall. And when it was too late, he fell and he plunged into the sea. Now, I flew over that place for a long time, hoping that he would emerge, but he did not. So I continued my journey to Sicily. It took a long time, weighed down by my grief as well as the distance. I landed in Sicily and I took off those wings and I went to a nearby island, Icaria, and I sat there on the shore. I sat there for a long time. And then eventually, as I knew it would, the sea brought the body of my beautiful son to me. And I held him in my arms, and I buried him there in that land of Icaria. And I sat on the shore of the Icarian Sea, and I watched the birds circling and circling and circling.
Sara Armstrong, everybody. It's so cool to hear that story told in that way, in a modern voice, and beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. And that is our show. Good night. I'm just kidding. No, we have one final storyteller to close things out, who, again, like Claire, needs no introduction, but I get to give one anyway because Regina is a member, it's an incredible member of this storytelling community, but is also a hilarious stand-up MC, performer, writer, and she lives in the burbs. I don't know that you can do that from the burbs. That's a thing. Anybody here from East Bay? Anybody here live in the East Bay? Great. Yes, fabulous. Because Regina is actually hosting or performing at an upcoming event that is in Livermore on November 16th called, it's a mouthful, I have to read it, the Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance Celebration at the Bankhead Theater. Just rolls off the tongue. Just rolls right off the tongue. So check out the Tri-Valley Nonprofit Alliance Celebration at the Bankhead Theater in Livermore, November 16th. But until then, check out Regina Stoops comedy and reginastoops.com. And welcome the one and only Regina Stoops. Skeletons, yeah.
Skeletons going. All right, how are we doing here? Excellent. Excellent. All right. Let's hear it for Corey Rosen, huh? The wonderful Corey Rosen. All right. How's that? Better? All right. I can be loud. I can probably be loud without the mic. Did you hear that? What? I said. That, Diane answered. And now that I was awake, I did hear it. It was kind of a shuffling, moaning, scratching sound. And I suddenly remembered where we were and how I'd gotten there. Diane and I were vacationing in Australia, and we were currently driving around the island state of Tasmania. And we were staying at the Seaview Lodge Host Farm. We checked in earlier in the day because it was on our way to Port Arthur. So to get there, you have to drive up this kind of windy, twisty gravel road through the forest. And then it opens up and you're on the top of the hill and you can see the bay. And so there we are. We drive up, and the lodge itself, that was kind of stretching the truth. The lodge, it was sort of this ramshackle building, kind of had been built haphazardly, very asymmetrical. And as we pulled up, a guy walked out and came over and introduced himself as Vince with a cheery, "G'day, how you going?" And he said we could go in and pick any room that we wanted. And then he paused and said, "You'll be my only guests for the evening." So we went in, and this place had no less than a dozen rooms. Each room had like 6 bunk beds in it. It had 2 kitchens, 4 bathrooms, this huge living room with a mishmash of furniture and a window that looked out over the bay. So we tossed our stuff on the bed of the room and went out and headed off for Port Arthur, the infamous penal colony. Now, back in the 1800s, the British had the great idea of sending all of the criminals to Australia. It was like the dungeon down under. And the worst of the worst were sent to Tasmania. So it was like the dungeon down under. And as if being on an island 100 miles from the mainland wasn't bad enough, this prison was at the end of the Tasman Peninsula, surrounded by shark-infested waters. And it was now a popular tourist attraction.
So we were headed there to take the ghost tour because it happened to be Valentine's Day, and we wanted to make it memorable. And, you know, what says romance by, like, being scared out of your wits with the one that you love? So the tour started about sundown. So we showed up, and our tour guide met us, Macca. And he's there with about 20 other people, and we each got a little lantern to carry so we could light the way. But it didn't really light the way. It was really more like a little circle of light at your feet and then just cast sort of shimmering, sinister shadows out to the side. And I was starting to question the romance in all this. First stop was the parsonage where the Reverend George Eastman and his wife lived with her 10 children. And George had died under mysterious circumstances in the upper bedroom, and rumor has it you could see lights flashing mysteriously, or you could hear footsteps running up and down the stairs. So we all crowded into the front room and shuffled around waiting for George or the kids to make an appearance. But of course, ghosts don't show up on cue, and especially not for 20 people. They prefer smaller groups so they can pick you off one at a time. So from the parsonage, we moved on to the separate prison. Right, we walked up this steep hill, and amazingly, Macca explained to us that back in the day, the Port Arthur prison was actually the cutting edge of prison reformation. They had finally figured out that traditional methods of punishment, like flogging, didn't seem to reform the prisoners. It either hardened them or it killed them. But then they thought, well, maybe if a man could just sit in quietness, he could contemplate his sins and turn away from evil. So they built a separate prison. And if the parsonage had been kind of a creaky farmhouse vibe, okay, the separate prison was definitely like a sinister, full-on creepy experience. It was cold, it was dark, and as soon as we stepped inside, it was like the light from our lanterns got sucked into the cold, damp stone walls. Macca explained to us that the prisoners were kept in these thick-walled, tiny cells for 23 hours a day, and the guards wore felt slippers and used sign language, so it was absolutely no sound. When the prisoners were let out for that 1 hour, they couldn't speak, and they had to have hoods over their head. It was total sensory deprivation. So we walked around and into some of the cells, particularly into one William Carter cell who had hung himself with a leather strap rather than endure this place. And when I went in there, it was like the despair and sadness just oozed out of the walls and into me. And I wondered if William had ever found peace. Not surprisingly, many of the inmates went mad. And while this was an unintended consequence, they had conveniently built the asylum right next door to the separate prison. And we walked out of the prison, past the asylum, and then Macca pointed out in the bay a small island, which he said was the island of the dead. And on that island, there were 1,500 bodies buried in unmarked graves. And it was said that these spirits could never rest because they weren't named, and so they would rise up out of their graves in the night, and they would go off in search of someone who would recognize them and help them move on. And it wasn't hard to imagine with the mist over the water that there were 1,500 ghosts coming my way. I felt like goosebumps and chills the whole time. When the tour was over, we got a certificate saying we had bravely and with courage survived the Port Arthur ghost tour, and we took off for our 20-minute drive back to the Seaview Lodge. Only this time when we turned onto that twisty gravel roadway, it's pitch dark and it's like a tunnel we're going through. And we start seeing these flashing lights kind of on the side of the road, and we realized it's our headlights reflected back of animals in the woods and on the side of the road. I can only assume marsupials because they have a lot of those in Australia. But then we came around the corner, and in the middle of the road was this small black furry creature making a meal of another small furry creature. Diane's like, "What is that?" I'm like, "It's a Tasmanian devil!" And my palms got sweaty on the steering wheel and was slipping, and it looked up at us, and it had these red, kind of glowing eyes, and its face was all red, I can only assume from the blood of whatever it was eating at the time. And we just kept creeping closer and closer, and it just kept eating and eating. Finally, when we were almost on top of it, it slunk off into the bush. So we carried on up the road through the gauntlet of flashing eyes until we got to the lodge, and we went inside and we started whispering. I don't know why, because as Vince had said, there were no other guests, and it was kind of like the silent prison because it was cold, it was dark, and there was a lot of rooms. So we just decided, let's get in bed, hunker down, pull the covers up. And that was all well and good until Diane woke me up with the, hey, did you hear that? Suddenly I'm wide awake, and I'm wide awake in the way that you are when you dream that you're falling, and right before you hit the ground, you wake up and your heart is pounding, rapid breath. Diane's like, do you think maybe it was William or George or one of the 1500? Half joking, half serious. I said, I don't know. Maybe we need to hold up our certificate as a protective shield. Instead, we got out of bed, had our flashlights, and started creeping through the lodge. And at the time, I remembered thinking that every teenage slasher movie I'd ever seen had taken place at either a camp, a hotel, or a farm, and we were staying at a combination of all three. So as we crept along, all of a sudden the noises stopped. So we stopped. And then they started. So we started. And we kept up this auditory, nocturnal game of red light, green light all the way through the lodge till we were back at our room. We still didn't know where the noise was coming from or what was making the noise, but decided again, let's just get back into bed, flashlights in hand, put a chair up against the door. Of course, if it was one of the ghosts, that probably wasn't going to help us, but we felt better. We felt better. And I guess we must have drifted back off to sleep, because the next thing I knew, I had woke up and there was light coming through the window. And I'm like, Diane, wake up. We're alive. Let's get the hell out of here. So we grab our backpacks and we head out the door, putting our stuff in the car. And Vince, the guide, the local host, comes strolling out. And he walks by and he's like, hey, I hope the wombat didn't keep you up last night. And he said this very nonchalantly, but with kind of this gleam in his eye. I said, wombat? He's like, yeah, it lives under the lodge, and sometimes at night it can make a lot of noise. He chuckled. He said, no, slept great. Slept fine. We're just getting an early start off to Hobart. I don't know why I didn't want Vince to know that we hadn't slept well. I think I just didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing that that omitted bit of information had scared the hell out of us. But as we drove away and Vince kind of receded in the rearview mirror, and I turned around and I looked at that big window in the living room, and I swear I saw this blurry little silhouette in the corner. And I wondered if it was George or one of the 1500 or just an overactive imagination and frayed nerves. And I'll never really know, but I couldn't help thinking, wombat my ass. Thank you.
Regina Stoops, everyone. At this time, I would like to invite all of the storytellers to here while they are coming. Just a couple of appreciations. I want to thank everybody who is watching online. Give it up for everybody that is watching at home. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your support. I want to thank everybody who came out on a Tuesday. What night is it? Thursday? I don't know what day it is. Yeah. I want to thank our hosts one more time here at the Wonderful Mechanics Institute. Thank you for your hosting.
And we'd like to thank
yeah.
Corey Rosen for being the best MC ever.
Yay, yes. All right. Let's all get together. Let's all smush together. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Tech Guru. Woo-hoo. All right. Yay. All right. Do we have the shot? We did Karen, Alyssa, Mechanic Institute. Terrific. All right. And thank you, Claire and Regina.
Thank you.
And thank you for the cake. Happy birthday, Kate, to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kate. Happy birthday to you. Yay. All right, that is our show. Now you can all go to the bar like ghosts do and have some booze. Thank you. Good night. Or some spirits.
6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical. So step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.